This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 43.
Tools that you choose for your students, that the amount of feedback that those can provide is really vital in, keeping your momentum going and keeping the students aware of where they stand with the standards. And so the tools that, I would use in class would have instant data for not just me, but for the students. And instead of selecting, keep that to myself, I would share that with my students and even write additional comments.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Greetings, my fellow educators. Welcome to the Powered Up Podcast. I am your host, Ken Ehrman, and I am here without my co-host, Mr. Matt, taking a sick day Rogers. I'm sad to say Matt is not here with me for our show today. He is not feeling well, and he is probably sleeping as I'm recording this. I hope he is. Let this be a reminder, teachers. It is usually more work to take off. That day off requires the sub-plans and all the other stuff. But when you need a day, take a day. You have to take care of yourself. You have to keep yourself well, whether it be physically, whether it be mentally, or you just need to spend the day organizing your garage. It's important to keep yourself at your best so you can be your best for your students. And so we will miss Matt, but I will try to trudge on and do my best for our show today. So I had a great interview with our guest from Ohio. She is a great educator. Her name is Samantha Schaffner, and she's in an interesting position where a large part of her job is involved in analyzing and using data and helping teachers use data. And that is a connotation that we talk about that typically does not get a welcome from open arms with teachers when it comes to the use of data in instruction, the use of data in meetings and wherever else it's coming out. But I think we do a great job of talking about how important data is, and it's how important it is to the individual classroom teacher, not just the people in their offices at district office aggregating and tabulating all the data and talking and making spreadsheets and passing down information. It is a powerful tool that can really impact your instruction, and we dive into that pretty deep. My fellow instructional coaches at Penn Ridge like to make fun of me because I talk about how much I love data, but the reality is, and I talk about this in the show, I used it a lot in my classroom, and I used it because it was one of my best ways to be able to target students for the skills they need, skills I could challenge them on, or just telling me exactly where they were. And it was another one of the tools I used to be able to have more individualized conversations and get to know my students better. Just like we talked about on this show before, the use of flipped instruction. I don't record lessons ahead of time so that I don't have to interact with my students and I can tell them to go hit play. I recorded those lessons ahead of time so I could trust that they were going to learn from me through the computer while I met with other students on a more one-on-one personal basis. So, the use of that technology allowed me to have better relationships with my students and work with them more on an independent or small group basis, and data falls right into that category as well. So Samantha and I really dive deep in data for the first part of the interview, and then we jump into some other topics as well. But I think you'll be able to walk away with some ideas of some tools and strategies to help make a great impact on the students you have right now or the teachers that you're working with on a daily basis. So without any further delay, let's bring in Samantha Schaffner to the Powered Up Podcast. Hi, Samantha. Welcome to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing today?
I am doing well. How are you, Ken?
I'm doing well. I'm doing very well. So thanks for joining us. We're excited to jump into this conversation with you and learn more about you. So to kick things off, why don't you officially introduce yourself, share where you're coming from, and just kind of a snapshot of what your career in education has looked like.
Awesome. All right. Well, I am coming from Columbus, Ohio. I work in Pickerington, Ohio for Pickerington local schools. And my position in education right now is coordinator of assessment and accountability. So that's a new position within our district in the central office. And it's pretty exciting, new stuff that I'm embarking on right now. And, things have really changed since COVID hit, and just a lot of accountability measures have sort of been, more highlighted and are coming to the surface right now. So getting adults to do what's best for students in schools at all times is sort of what we're after, and also, test scores and whatnot. So that is what I am up to now, and my background is in dropout prevention and recovery, mostly English language arts, but I also have worked in, ed tech and blended learning, as well as assessment design and content creation and whatnot, because, when you're working in schools that are smaller, like in Ohio, there are a ton of charter schools, and I have been I've been trained in some environments that are really hardcore, where you kind of have to make do with what you have, and make some pretty difficult decisions on the fly about curriculum and what's best for students. So I've been sort of used to making standards-based curriculum on my own my whole career. So that kind of gave me a good start for what I'm doing today at Pickerington. But yeah, that's sort of my angle, and I am hoping to get some nice common assessment, benchmarking and whatnot laid out this year, and some more plans for the future. But these things kind of go slowly. So
thanks for sharing. It's an interesting journey that you're on and in your position. So as a classroom teacher, it was secondary English, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what was it about assessments, standard aligning, and those components that were perhaps a passion of yours as a classroom teacher? Why did they become a passion of yours to kind of develop into the position that you've moved into?
Well, I guess I'll have to start with, I was working with middle schoolers for the first time in my career, like 10 years in, and it was sort of part of our district policy to use a program called Edulastic to, drive daily instruction and, provide like pre and post tests, so entrance and exit tickets. And we also did local benchmarking via this platform. So we were charged with creating our own post tests every day, like, a 2-question exit ticket or something like that. And I guess I don't know if I was bored or just competitive, but I started playing around with, all the different types of questions and just ways that I could adapt my own curriculum to the platform, and the students would still be practicing, all the skills that they would need to master on a modern, like, digital assessment, high stakes, ACT, whatever it may be. So they actually became really proficient at typing and answering, standards aligned questions that went along with novel studies and all types of things. And then I would sort of, scaffold more difficult content in and out and use released items until eventually we were about we started at -6 growth points the year before, and we were at positive 56 the next year for the whole 3rd through 8th grade, and those were just my 2 English cohorts that brought all those points to the table. So, it took a year and a half to catch, but the resources that application provided, along with, going along with our blended suite really well, kind of got me into a, like, I see this works, that's a result. Like, I'm going to do it again and again and again because it's working with the kids. They're getting the feedback that they need, and the momentum was pretty strong. So I think that was my aha moment, was having an app that I could really rely on for content and for data.
Right. And I, as a classroom teacher, I actually loved to use data. And I ran a very student-centered, personalized, very differentiated classroom, especially in math and reading. Almost always we were working in centers. I primarily did instruction through small group style versus whole class, unless the data showed that the entire class happened to need assistance on a particular skill. But I think so often data has a terrible reputation when it comes to interest from teachers in using it. And I want to get your opinion on why you think that is. Why is it that so many teachers fear data? They get anxious about data. They think it doesn't serve a purpose in a classroom. What is it about data that it has such a bad reputation with teachers? And what do you think are some misconceptions that maybe could eliminate some of those fears and negative connotations with it?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think that someone could coin the term like data shaming. It's a real experience that teachers have. I think all of us have gone through some kind of like data shameful moment where we wanted to show growth, on a vendor assessment and we didn't, or our, state test scores, we thought we were going to really, get to the state marker, but it just didn't happen because of reasons X, Y, or Z. So, the very real fear of being told you don't know what you're doing, or having more, I guess, interventions or corrective action plans and coaching and those sorts of things. Like, I think the accountability piece is a little bit scary because it hasn't really ever been there, before in such a structured manner. So it's funny, like in this position I'm in right now, like I am the most laid back person ever, and I feel like a cop, and like it's like not how I'm approaching it, but I sort of feel like it's perceived like that sometimes because, I am looking at goals and data and indicators and seeing where we're at, but it from a supportive angle, I suppose. So I think people need to sort of trust, who they're working with, and, understand that this stuff's new and it is powerful and it's researched and it works and it makes sure that everyone's doing their jobs, and it also saves us time because it's, the click of a button, you can have so much information on a student. It's almost too much to like begin to grapple with, at any given point in time. But that's how we're able to work with such diverse, populations and still serve our kids and, solve problems and whatnot. So misconceptions about data are out there, but they're all different types of data. I think that the whole story is important, like how you got there and the struggles and what you learned. And so, it doesn't all have to be like bright shining stars. We learn from the bad data too. That's kind of where we find our root causes. So
yeah, it's a powerful tool, and where I want to go with next after I share this quick story about the overwhelming factor of the amount of data that we do have available right now. But I taught for the first 6 years of my career in fifth grade. I taught fifth grade to 3 homerooms. We rotated for different subjects, and then I transitioned into being self-contained. But I would always, for every year of my career, I gave the same standard assessment that I gave to every class within the first week, and it was really a assessment of just their ability to do basic computation, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, some other basics that they should have had in fourth grade but would be heavily involved in fifth grade. And I used, at the time, I think I was using a tool called Socrative, which was just an automatic grading tool. There's so many out there that are available now to teachers for free. Google Forms, everything there is available. And it would give me a good marker on where the students were at, and which students I could keep in mind when multiplication approached that seemed to not have a grasp of that skill, or division. You had your students that showed up as being great at all of them, not being great at all of them, and then you would have a student that looked great, but for whatever reason multiplication wasn't their thing. And so I kind of kept that in the back of my mind as I would approach that unit. I would reference back to the data. But I had one year where a class scored astronomically lower than any class I had ever seen before. And what it told me is, it gave me pause to say, I almost did like a unit 0 where I just did a 1.5 week boot camp on let's get these skills to a higher level before we can really jump into learning about volume in the first month of school. And so when you look at the information from year to year, especially if you're in the same position, it can really give you a good understanding of where a class is overall, or where a particular student is. And so when it comes to that, and it comes to the amount of data that we have, and you have a teacher that is interested in using data, and they see that it can benefit the students in front of them, but they're overwhelmed by the volume or the amount, where do you advise that they go first? What is something that they can use as their launching pad for their first, type of instruction that is data influenced or data driven?
I would say that making sure that your class period is structured for pre and post, assessment pieces, even if it's just over a couple of standards, is really important. However you're going to conduct those assessments is sort of up to the person. But, as long as it is a tool that's engaging, that the kids can access, that they can, do asynchronously. I'm really big on being able to complete activities anywhere, on a phone, on a Chromebook, wherever internet exists, I guess. But I would say Edge Elastic, like I said, is a really good product. Quizzes is really nice for, pre-test material and just vocabulary and all sorts of things. The premium product's really nice. So is Kahoot. Those serve really well as pre-tests. And Pear Deck is a really great product to, use as you're pacing out your lessons and just, polling kids and asking them certain interactive type questions to keep them engaged through a virtual setting as well. And you can keep everything in sync because, well, when it's on your LMS and everything is lined up and you have all the different modes it can operate in, I would definitely operate with materials that work with Google and things that speak with grade books and save time, but also have some kind of standards based grading element where you can actually see in a snapshot where your kids are during a given lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's key about those features, if you've used one or you've used multiple or you've never heard of them, and throwing Google Forms in there as well, is the automatic grading feature. And you hit on it perfectly about being efficient and saving us time. Data's got to be automatically computed so the teacher can spend their time analyzing and planning instruction versus tabulating the data. That's not something anyone
should be doing. We don't have time for that, and it's unnecessary. I mean, why I like Edge Elastic so much is because I don't have to download anything, and it disaggregates in any way you would want it to, and the standards based thing is really nice as well. But it's Pear Deck. I mean, people need to understand the different formative assessment comes in very small to medium-sized pieces, right? So it's, any sort of observation that you make during a class is data. If a kid writes a journal entry about what school is like for them, that's also data, So I guess we need to remember that there are the very human pieces of data out there that we have to, take into account when we're trying to really figure out how to best serve our kids with what we have.
Absolutely. I think, like you said, data comes in so many forms, and to create an analogy with baseball, there's a big push for analytics, and in sports in general. Moneyball was really the first thing that pushed it in baseball, and you have the crowd of, the old school scouts that say, I can watch a guy, I can watch a pitcher, I can watch a player, and I can tell you what he's good at, what he's not good at, and if he'll develop or not. And then you have the analytical side that says, all I need is the stats. I don't need to see the actual player. I just need to see how they perform. And then you kind of have that middle ground where, like, someone can see the past, see the future, and see that there's probably a blend of both. The stats tell the story, but you also need to see the player to understand work ethic and all these different
Did they get a red rush flag?
Yeah, exactly. So, it's I think it's the same in a classroom. You need to understand, and you need to know, and you need to connect with your students and form those relationships to understand them as a person. But at the same time, you can use data from the past and the present to say, wow, they're typically really good at reading, but for whatever reason, they don't understand what an inference is at all. And that showed up on their state test, and it showed up on this pretest that I just gave. And so those are indicators that they might be a high flyer and roll with, your blue group at most times. But when it comes to an inference, you need to pull them into the yellow group because they don't understand that skill at all. So,
or they might understand it, but they don't think that that's the word.
Right, exactly. So can you give some practical advice for how a teacher can really use data to adjust or plan or, differentiate their instruction?
I would say, conferring with your students while they're completing writing tasks, excuse me, or any kind of assessment that you have, your access to watch what they're doing on your computer, like in a discrete manner, and then kind of check back and forth. I've had a class of 25, 30 students where I've been able to actually give them a prompt, a writing prompt, and say use the RACE method to, write a summary about this Newsella article, and they would get on Wakelet and they would write their racer paragraph, and I would watch it in real time and see who was struggling and who wasn't, kind of walk around with my MacBook Air oh, you need help over here, and, how about you help Paris over here because she needs help putting her, details in paraphrasing or, just anything like that. A lot of conferring and collaboration, I guess, with students, and just having real honest conversations with them about what you're expecting them to perform in class. That works out really well. And also just, the real-time factor, like I said, if they're completing an activity and I can see on my live board, that they're struggling, I can go and have an individual conversation and no one hears anything at all. They just am doing normal, progress monitoring and walking around the room. So I think that, using it in real time is definitely something that I recommend.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. What is or when you were in the classroom, or even when you're working with teachers now, what's the relationship of data with the students? Were they involved in analyzing their own data? Were they aware of their scores at times, at all the time? How did you develop a relationship, or did you not, with students and their own data?
Actually, so, you have your overachievers in every building, so I would post mine on a board, here is your benchmark from, last week, and I would print the question analysis report from, we used Edulastic at Millennium when I was teaching middle school there as well, and so this report would just show, it would read what the questions were, and it would have the class average for each, and then which standard was associated with each, and just some basic data on each question, and then we would go through as TBT groups and say like, okay, we went over standards, RI1 and RI2, and then maybe like writing standard 2 or something. And, how did your lowest 20% do? And what could we do to up these scores so, we reach our goals in the spring or in the winter? Or, how do we help these individual students, with tier 2 interventions or whatever? So, it can provide a lot of valuable discussions. And I kind of forgot where we started with that question, but
just what you did to develop a relationship between students and their own data, how aware they were of it, how much they used it.
I would say that the feedback loop would have been the most important relationship students had with data. Like, I mean, I did have my data wall with my benchmark scores on it, and I would say, like, you'll get a pizza party if we raise these scores, like, so much and before the next time, because, well, food can do a lot for middle schoolers. But, yeah, I think that the tools that you choose for your students, that the amount of feedback that those can provide is really vital in keeping your momentum going and keeping the students aware of where they stand with the standards. And so the tools that I would use in class would have instant data for not just me but for the students, and instead of selecting like keep that to myself, I would share that with my students and even write additional comments, say you go, or like here's a writing item, here's a rubric, let's elaborate on these items so you can get a perfect score next time or whatever. So yeah, I think the feedback loop and using tools that give students that snapshot that they need as well on a daily basis.
Yeah, again, like you said, leveraging those tools that you have that are doing the automatic grading, a lot of them are set where you can choose the option, do the students see the score or not? And it doesn't change any of your setup. It's not any more work. And I would do it as much as I possibly could when it made sense. For a pre-test on a new unit or a new skill, I typically wouldn't show them because they were probably going to do pretty poorly on it in theory. So I didn't find it necessary. But when it was a mid-unit check or it was mid-unit data, I almost always shared it with them. And I also explained to them exactly why they took so many tests in my room. And, they were, you said this earlier, they were 1 or 2 questions, on a semi-weekly basis. And I would explain to them, listen, this tells me how much more help you need, or this tells me how much I can challenge you because you're excelling so well, or it tells me that you're right on track and you're ready to just, keep progressing forward into the concepts that we're going to learn. But I told them that the most important thing is that they did it honestly. If it was math specifically, sometimes it was, grading it based on the number they took in, or sometimes they would solve it without seeing multiple choice, but then I would put in multiple choice. However, the grading was going to be automatic for me, but I told them the worst thing they can do is guess, because if they guess right, and I'm not going to help you. Like, if you guess right, that tells me that you know what you're doing and you actually don't. And so, that relationship with their own data, I think, was pretty authentic. And I can remember students coming up to me and saying, hey, Mr. Ehrman, I just did, our check for the day. I bombed it, but I don't think I was paying attention. Can I submit another one? And then they would submit another one, and maybe they still bomb it again, or maybe they did better. But, it was that idea that they understood that what they were doing mattered. And also, I wanted them to understand that this wasn't the end-all, be-all of the class. And by doing this and giving their effort and allowing me to differentiate the instruction was also the way I was able to incorporate so much more that we did in the classroom. It was the way I was able to allow them to code spheros or do 3D printing projects in math class, because the use of data allowed me to be more efficient in targeting instruction, and then also giving them opportunities where they didn't need that targeted instruction and they needed targeted enrichment. And so, the use of data wasn't so that we were score driven, we were test driven. That was the opposite of the mantra in my room, but it was a tool that allowed me to make sure that I was always providing exactly what they needed. And so, I just think it's a conversation that is difficult to have in education right now because there's so much pressure, there's so much negativity to it. And frankly, I also don't think the approach is done well from districts because I don't think they always have an understanding of how data can impact classrooms in a positive way and in an efficient way. So what are the things that you're doing in your position where you're working with multiple teachers? What are strategies you use to encourage the more frequent use of data and to allow them to use it to improve their instruction or target their instruction and still do all the other things outside of data that they still love to do?
So, we're working with a few main products right now. And I would say that iReady, the adaptive, the personalized learning pathways that are created when students take iReady reading and math diagnostic tests, that is a product that our district is standing behind and we, have been invested in for a few years. And iReady shows results when it's used in the right way. So it's not necessarily taking the place of the teacher. It's response to intervention. It's like station rotation or, during E&I time or something like that. But we're really trying to actually get into the data literacy piece and actually look at the reports and for the specific cohorts and find the deficits and discuss the needs by domain and how to, structure goals that are actually, achievable and to, set out different markers along the way and such. So it's not like something that's far out in the future that's, not really attainable. It's more something that you can look at and say like, okay, like I think that we can, if we do so many lessons in intervention and, hit this adult implementation indicator of making sure we have this many intervention minutes for the students, maybe, the correlation will be that we'll have some gap closing as a result. So that is one thing we are doing right now. We're trying to get a PD going with curriculum associates as far as getting our teachers and coaches and principals sort of hipped to how to read these pretty in-depth reports, because like you said before, this massive ocean of data can consume anyone. We have a trainer coming in on Friday and I have been coordinating with her and I'm just like, let's just focus on 3 or 4 of the toolbox items, because I don't really want to go into the weeds right now. There's a lot of pressure. We use these other products, so that's sort of, try to, I guess, connect the whole piece that we're measuring against standards and we're measuring against students' performance against their own performance. So we have growth and we have, grade level, standards-based criteria, and those are 2 different things, but they both measure how our students are performing, how we're performing, and, tell us what we need to do to get them to where they need to be. Because I at the district level, working with 15 buildings and going to all of their leadership meetings, it's incredible to hear about just the learning gaps that have taken place during COVID, or just, some people don't really want to be as transparent as others, but you have people in tears half the time just saying my kids don't have fine motor skills. What building am I in? This is the high school, they can't cut with scissors. What's been happening in the last couple of years? Really, if we assessed everyone at the same level right now, where would it all shake out? I don't know. It's kind of, I want people to take it in stride, I guess. It's just, we don't have enough research right now to know what happened over the last couple of years, but we do know good strategies to get them back to a good place. So that's kind of where I'm
definitely.
at.
And what I would say to any teachers listening to this, if your district is using some sort of tool that measures data at a broad level, so it's aggregating most likely state assessments, district level benchmarks, things like that, things that you're not giving in your classroom, that is being mandated to you by the district or by the state. If you have a program like, my district uses Linkit, and it seems like EduElastic is the program that your district's using, regardless of what it is. Whoever's in charge, here's one question you can ask them to make an impact on your instruction the next day, is say, how do I sort my students? How do I sort my students based on a standard or skill? And so then you can say, okay, I'm going to be teaching this standard next week, and you can sort your students based on that standard. And you'll get a quick snapshot of, are they all below expectation? Are they all above? Is there a good mix? And then am I going to approach it from a more differentiated standpoint? Am I going to have to spend 2 extra days on this versus what I had planned because everybody's lower? Or, wow, my class is great at this skill, we can blow through it, or we can go in depth, or we can do a fun activity versus going through the nitty gritty stuff. So, it's very simple. Now, I don't know how your program works or if that's available, but that's one simple approach that you can take week by week, month by month. You just go to a skill and filter and sort them based on that skill.
I know that's something that we actually, I've been running assessment, like the district I was at last year. I was the assessment head for the district as well. So I kind of designed our common assessment system using EduElastic, and you can actually break down like each standard that's assessed, and it will tell you like the amount of green, yellow, red, and whatever. And so like, okay, this is going well, or this isn't, or sometimes I level the items up and down just because they might have some level of proficiency. It just might not be on grade level. And you see, okay, these kids they have a basic understanding of this, or they're, growing in this area, but they're not on grade level, but they're moving up with the skill, with the practice. So yeah, that's definitely, the performance bands are major. So.
Excellent. So I want to take a hard shift on the conversation here, and I want to learn what was Miss Schaffner like just in her classroom. So to put the data aside, what would your kids say about what class was like with you? What were things that you were passionate about doing in your classroom and that you think set yourself apart, or was just different about being a part of your classroom?
Well, let's see. Different about being a part. I guess I relied pretty heavily on humor, like appropriate humor. I had really good rapport with my students, so, they always knew that I was coming from a place of understanding, and that it wasn't really negotiations in like a bad way, but like I did the bulk of my work in Franklinton Preparatory Academy, which is like in the poorest neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. And it's just really, really rough over there. And the challenges the kids were facing were pretty insane. So, the way that I had to approach work was much different. And I would say that what set me apart was, we tried to do fun and creative things, like engagement was a major component. I definitely was pretty into systems, like just trying to find ways to make sure that when they came in, like they had clear directions, and they had their Chromebooks, and they were on to a task. And then, our conversations would be very not me talking at them. It would be, more of a collaboration. I did teach literature that was a little bit lofty for my students at times. Like I was teaching the Metamorphosis to 9th graders like every year. And just, there were certain texts that I guess might be, I might be a little bit more intimidated to teach now, but that back then, my kids were like slaying at like Sylvia Plath, like analysis and stuff like that. And it was cool to see them be able to, function within such like, I don't know, difficult curriculum when they were coming from places where that could be pretty similar to things that they were experiencing. So I was pretty, progressive with my curriculum and my approaches, and definitely very flexible and, individualized with my, instructional strategies and differentiations, and just, I guess it's more of equity, not equality, if that makes sense. So just getting kids what they need and doing what you got to do to get there.
So I'm going to try to frame this question the best I can, because I just thought of it as you were saying it. You talked about rapport, which I think is hugely important, and I think it's sometimes difficult for a teacher to share how they develop good rapport, because it's like when you're good at it, you're just good at it, and it's hard to kind of put your thumb on like what is it other than like just developing that good relationship. But you also talked about being very individualized in the way you approached instruction. So do you think your way to establish a positive rapport made it easier to implement individualized instruction in your classroom, or do you think the fact that you are providing more individualized instruction in your classroom fed into having a better rapport with students?
I think it was the first one. And age groups are different. I worked mostly with 11th and 12th graders, but like quite a few years with 9th graders too. And then I had 7th and 8th graders for 3 years. And the 7th and 8th graders, it's much more transactional. Like, am I going to get pizza if we're doing a thing? Or how fast can I go to the dollar store during lunch to make sure that these guys have candy so that they can do this stuff? But with the high schoolers, they knew I was going to understand, and they knew that I was going to work with them, and it wasn't going to be a hard deadline. There was not going to be anything that was going to really ruffle my feathers. Like, at the end of a conversation, I'm going to say, I'm going to support you. Let's learn this, like how you need to learn this. If I need to adjust this assignment, let's adjust this assignment. As long as you are meeting this learning target, we'll do it this way. And that's between us, and it's fair because, you're you and this person is this person. And it was kind of, you would think people would think you have an issue with being fair, but I was never ever called unfair with grading or like favorites or anything like that. Like, it was just everyone knew that they were going to get that amount of grace as well. And taking the time to like actually go around to all their desks while they're journaling. And I think journaling is really powerful. In language arts class, it gives you time to kind of settle in and, ask them something that can give you a little bit of a picture of what their lives are like. And then when you go around and, confer with them or just check in on them, you can kind of see, if they're struggling or if they're having a great day. And, it's just a touch point. So I think that is really important as well, just making sure you're keeping up that conversation with them about their lives.
Yeah, it's something that I often thought about, and I felt like I wanted to, as quickly as possible, establish that positive rapport and let the students know that they were cared about. I had their back. It was going to be mutual respect, but I also felt as though the way I delivered instruction through a personalized approach and the care that I put into how they were engaging with the content really fed into them almost backing up what I was saying, like, I really do care about you, and I'm going to provide you with the experience that I think is best for you. And, it just really feeds that, they both feed each other in terms of developing that rapport, which then also I think has a better impact on being able to deliver better individualized instruction, because the kids, I think, are a little bit more motivated, because they have to be motivated in an environment like that, because you're putting a lot of trust in their ability to do what you're asking them to do, and to follow through on what you're assigning them, and providing the opportunities to them.
And once they're, feeling their selves, so they have that flow, they're up and running, so that little bit of confidence and that relationship, really, it's everything.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to transition actually into our lesson lens to try to learn a little bit more about your classroom. This could, perhaps you're going to share something you used to do, or perhaps you're going to share something you've helped other teachers do. However you want to take it, we are all for. So question number 1, are we going to look at a unit overview, a long-term project, or a single lesson?
So this is a single lesson.
All right. So what was the intent grade level, subject area, and if it was time of year specific, let us know that as well.
So this activity, it was for, so in dropout prevention classes, most students need to pass the state tests. So most students are in English 9-10 until they, have passed that class. So these kids could have been 21 or 16 or whatever, but the grade band was 9-10. We were reading The Giver, which does seem lower on the Lexile level than some things that you could read at that, I guess, grade level. However, it's not difficult to, find ways to supplement reading to, hit different students at different grade levels with the themes that are involved. So this activity I have pulled up right here, I have it it's in the Chromebook App Hub, and I actually I used Wakelet to make it, but I took a deck from Bunsey and just embedded a bunch of multimedia, and it was kind of like a Twitter chat. It was like a QA format, and it was asking students to reflect on reading, and they got to choose, which questions they wanted to answer, and they had to restate the question and give a detail from the text. But the cool part, the voice and choice, element to the whole thing was they had the option to answer with a Flipgrid shorts video instead, and just, complete the task, but do it orally. So that was, it was a cool activity, and we actually repeated it a few times with a few different chapters, and even with some articles from Newsella, and just, we've made a lot of collaborative writing collections that have been really helpful in developing student writing skills and confidence in writing. They enjoy sharing it, and they enjoy collaborating in real time, using, online tools. So that is the lesson lens that I have, and I can give you a link to that project as well if you would like to share it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll share that in our show notes page, which I'll share at the end of the show on how to access that. The last question I want to ask you in regards to that is, while the students were participating in these different activities that you just shared, what was your role during the lesson to really ensure the success of the students during that time?
To be honest with you, it was the front loading, the pre-work. So just making sure that, okay, how many access points do I have here? They can get on this in an immersive reader. I have the audio here. I have a video here of me giving these directions. I'm, giving them exemplar Flipgrid video responses. I'm typing exemplar. So it's setting them up for success via modeling, and I guess giving them a platform to be creative within. That's actually structured and controlled and, tailored by me, which they can tell because it's specific to what we're doing in class. So, yeah, I guess making sure that it is colorful and engaging and, has all the bells and whistles that they want to, create, and it inspires them after that. You just walk around and, I have done activities before where I give them the discussion questions prior to, and they would write them out on like a Post-it note and then, go put it on the big Post-it note on the wall for that question just to kind of warm them up for the activity. But something that has helped this be successful is like giving them the option. Like you can choose 2 out of 4 or, 3 out of 6 of these questions, and it doesn't matter which ones, and you can answer them in these ways, and here's your rubric. So that was nice as well. They liked having the choice, and they also liked sharing their, authentic product with a larger audience. I would have them just put their first names on the activity in share mode, and they would be like, oh, share that to Twitter, and let's see if, let's see how many likes we get or any retweets. And they don't really know Twitter like they know Snapchat and TikTok, but they're getting a better understanding about how powerful, these tools can be for networking and stuff that will be in their futures very soon. So
very cool. So you said you did the lesson a few times with different chapters and topics. Was there any adjustments you made after the first one that you realized maybe should have been a little bit more in that pre-planning, like you said, the front loading, or during the time of instruction? What were some adjustments you made to kind of tweak it and modify it throughout?
The aesthetics, definitely, that was a thing. So adding the Flipgrid option was nice, and adding the option to choose which questions you answer was also nice. It wasn't always that smooth. Also, I guess I was downloading Buncee images with the questions, so it would structure the page out better, and it was just a lot. It was a lot more engaging because it was something to look at, and I could embed an example video response or a different resource or a quote or something like that, and they could have the Buncee that actually had all of the embeds in it, and then also this structured Q1, Q2, Q3, where it kept it all in line and it made sense and it looked more clean, and so they were more apt to engage with it when it was more organized.
Excellent. So the last segment of our show is called the exit ticket. Same 4 questions we ask every guest every week. Question number 1, what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
What is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better? I would say meet them where they are. We can't just say you're in 3rd grade, you're in 4th grade, you're in 5th grade, or you're Sally, or you're Sue, or you're Pedro, or you're Paul. These kids are so diverse. It's incredible. Acknowledge that and celebrate that and meet them where they are, and you'll be able to bring them places rather than having them, raised to an expectation that they don't really know is there.
That's a great answer. I love it. What is the best advice you've ever received, whether it be from a colleague, a supervisor, or even a student?
Oh, man. Okay. The best the best advice I have ever received. Well, I'm just going to cut this one short. My last supervisor, love him to death. His name is Jamal. And, when you're an administrator, you have to kind of shake things off from time to time when you're catching a bunch of this, that, and the other. And he gave me a statement to say when I just needed to be very blunt about things. And I just have said ever since then, I don't mince words. And that one's always stuck.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that. So the school year goes in waves. We have times where, as teachers, we're struggling, we're stressed because it's conferences, report cards, all those different extra things that kind of seem to pile up at the same time. So in those moments of struggle, what is something you would want every educator to hear to power up?
I think that knowing you're not alone, that there's everyone, I guess, assume best intentions from your leaders, but also, feel if you have needs and they're not being met, people need to express these things, because leadership doesn't know what's going on unless people tell us or invite us to their buildings or whatever. So, if you want support from leadership because you are feeling a little down and out, invite them to your building, into your classroom, so they can see, what it's like on the ground, and assume that everyone is there with the same mission, and that right now things are rough, but don't give up, because so many people have, and it's really sad. And, I think that we're going to have to get through this, especially, to be able to address the later learning needs of the kids that are going through pandemic education right now. It's, we have a lot of work ahead of us. So, keep on keeping on.
Absolutely. So it's so easy to fall as a classroom teacher into facilitating, a rather repetitive classroom. What is it that you think separates the teachers that constantly seek change, innovation, and just pursuing new teaching strategies to, bring their classroom to a new level?
I think that taking risks is really difficult for teachers, because you have your control elements. Like, you have to be able to control your classroom environment. We all know that any little change, like the weather or whatever, can make or break, like there's a full moon, like God bless it, right? That can really throw a wrench in things. So, I'm talking about full moons. Where did I start?
It's late. It's all right.
What makes teachers innovative? Okay. Be willing to take risks, and willing to let your students fail, and be willing to take their criticism and take it in stride, because they're there to make you better too. It's a two-way street. So I definitely think putting your time in to find something that they're interested in, that benefits them, that you can work with, and just, I guess, getting into something, project-based learning, whatever it may be, but let them fail and let them learn, and let yourself fail in there.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so last of the day, and this is more of just a request. Tell us how our audience can connect with you in the future.
Oh, our audience can connect with me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is at Samantha Schaffn2. So at SAMANTHASHAFFN 2 without the pound sign. And yeah, that's probably the best way to reach me, would be on Twitter.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I've really
and please
enjoyed
reach
this
out. I would love to continue this conversation, for real. It is late, but I am enjoying myself. I'm still awake, so it's a good sign.
Good. Yeah. Good. I'm glad. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Some of the other instructional coaches in my district like to tease me that I'll talk about how much I love data, but it's because I saw the impact that it had on my classroom, and keeping it simple. I think that's something that I try to do as an instructional coach to help teachers is not to get overwhelmed. Like you said, show them the one or two features that they need to know that's going to actually have an impact on students in the classroom. So Yep. So keep working at it. It's a tough position you're in, but it's going to do a lot of positive for the teachers as well as the students. Some of the websites and links and resources that Samantha talked about, as well as her lesson that she's going to share with me, it will all be linked up on our show notes page, which can be found on our website as always at powereduup.com. And in this one, it's going to be /show43. So powereduup.com/show43. You can find all those resources there. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast. Share it with another teacher. We want other teachers and other educators to hear the incredible ideas, resources, and just the passion of educators that we have on this show. And we want the narratives of all of our guests to be shared with as many people as possible, so they can pick up a couple tips, they can take a new approach to their classroom, or maybe just confirm what they're doing is having a positive impact on students. So we appreciate everyone listening and subscribing. I normally get to pass it off to Matt here to close down the show, but I guess I'm going to have to take the reins on that one. So again, thank you so much, Samantha. You left us feeling powered up as we power down this episode. Have a great day, everyone.